In this video, we're going to be recapping the 2018 World Junior Championship medal games, going over the medal winners, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on who are the top players of the tournament. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. On this channel, we review and discuss all 31 NHL teams as well as international tournaments. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider hitting that subscribe button now so you don't miss anything. So let's do a quick recap of the medal games for the World Junior Championships, and then I'll give you my thoughts on who I thought were the top players of the tournament. Obviously, the United States defeated the Czech Republic to win the bronze medal. As I mentioned in the preview, it wasn't really all that close. The U.S. dominated the game, and another big game from Kiefer Bellows, who was an outstanding goal scorer during this tournament, and the U.S. went on to win bronze. It's only a shame they didn't have more fans in attendance to watch the game. As most of you probably know, the attendance for this tournament wasn't fantastic, even when the U.S. was playing, but at the end of the day, they still walked away with a medal for consecutive years, which looks good on them as the program continues to develop. I'm sure they're disappointed they didn't get a chance to play for gold in back-to-back years, but there's a lot of top players in this tournament that are going to go on to prominent NHL careers. Gold medal game, we saw Team Canada walk away with gold, defeating Team Sweden by a score of 3-1. This game was very close and very tight, and as I mentioned in the preview, even though I predicted Canada to win, I said it really could go either way, as both of these teams were very well matched up. They both have great goaltenders, some pretty strong defenders, and some dynamic forwards who can score. In all honesty, Sweden probably has more of the skill up front with the forwards, but Team Canada played a very solid team game, and they do have lots of guys that can put the puck in the net. They had to play a little bit more of the team approach, whereas Sweden has a few guys that can kind of kill you a little bit more one-on-one. So it was a very tight game all the way through. It wasn't until just a little over 2 minutes to go in the third period, Canada ended up with putting the winning goal ahead. Excellent play from Connor Timmins on the blue line, get the pass through to Tyler Steenbergen, who redirected it into the net for the lead. Canada later added an empty netter from Alex Formenton and went on to win 3-1. So obviously this Team Canada crew, even though it lacked the star power, worked well as a team. And as we discussed in the original preview, I thought that might actually be a strength for them, as a lot of these guys might play better knowing that they need to have that. Whereas sometimes when you have that star power, sometimes you see other guys not push as hard as they can, knowing that there's other star players on the team who can take over. But their real strength proved to be in goal and on defense. As I mentioned in the preview, Carter Hart was outstanding. Even though the Swedish goalie Gustafsson was voted top goalie of the tournament, I thought Carter Hart was outstanding. It was especially in the gold medal game. That was the main game he had to be on top of his game. He wasn't really tested a whole lot in the other appearances, except for the game against the United States. But he performed very well and led them to gold. Their defense corps all had to play different roles because they had some key injuries throughout the tournament, but the strength and depth of their D was also a big factor in the victory. I'm going to give you some thoughts on who I thought were the top players of the tournament. Obviously the two top goalies of the tournament played against each other in the final game. Gustafsson from Sweden and Hart from Canada were both outstanding. I think they both have an excellent shot at moving on to the NHL later on. Carter Hart's a Philadelphia Flyers prospect, and considering the Flyers' state of their goaltending has been in desperate need of a top goalie for a long time, I think Flyers fans finally have something to look forward to there. If you look on the blue line, Rasmus Dahlin from Sweden was voted top defender of the tournament. He certainly is going to be a dynamic player, more than likely going to go first overall in the 2018 June entry draft. I'm not sure he was a top defender of the tournament. I do agree he had a great tournament, played very well, especially considering his age and he's not drafted yet. At the same time though, I think some other players might have been better overall. Like for Canada, I think Connor Timmins was probably their top defender in my opinion. He played a very solid game all around. He's a Colorado Avalanche draft pick, and I think he's got a bright career ahead of him. He not only played well on the defensive end, but he chipped in on the offense, setting up the game-winning goal for the gold medal perfectly late in the third period. As I mentioned in the preview, Cale Makar was a name to be a lot more familiar with by the end of the tournament, and I think anybody who watched this tournament closely certainly will be. He's a Colorado Avalanche draft pick, went fourth overall last year's draft. He had a tremendous tournament. He did play limited minutes in certain games. As at the beginning of the tournament, he basically came in as a number 7 defenseman, but I knew with his talent level he'd work his way in and had some games where he ended up playing 20 and 25 minutes. He was key against the United States. He was key against Sweden as well. So Makar, I think, was also a big name on the back end that really stood out for me. So Makar and Timmins, I think, was the top two blue liners for Canada. For the United States, look at Adam Fox. He certainly could be an NHL defenseman. I think he's really close to being ready right now. I can see him not, starting out maybe as a bottom pair defenseman and working his way up. I think he'd be great in the power play. He seems to be very good at lugging the puck through. Quinn Hughes wasn't too bad for the United States. He's another undrafted player, but he certainly made a name for himself as well. In my opinion, the top player of the tournament that really stood out the most from an offensive perspective was the United States' Casey Middlestat. That guy has a lot of talent. He's going to be a top center, and where he's drafted by the Buffalo Sabres, I think he'll be getting opportunity as soon as he wants it. This guy can really play. He's got some excellent offensive moves, and I think he really stood out for me as the top offensive player. Kiefer Bellows is quite the sniper from the United States as well. I think obviously he comes from a nice bloodline there, with his dad being Brian Bellows, former NHL player, who was a very solid goal scorer throughout his career. So he gets it honestly, and he's certainly proven like he can keep that up. And he's got a wicked shot, and he can be quite a dynamic sniper. So Kiefer Bellows going to the Islanders. I imagine he'll be there sooner than later as well. For Team Canada up front, I think there was certainly a variety of players. The one that stood out for me was Ottawa Senators draft choice, Drake Batherson. Batherson's another prime example of never giving up. His original junior year, he didn't get drafted. He was late getting into junior. He was passed over his first year of eligibility for the NHL draft, and was a 4th round pick of the Senators last year. So he's really been a little bit of a late bloomer. Another case of perseverance paying off. He ended up scoring some wicked big goals. I think he ended up with 7 goals for the tournament. He's got a bright future ahead of him as well. I think he stood out for me as the most dynamic forward for Team Canada. But I mean, they have some other guys like Sam Steele, Dylan Dubé, Jordan Kyrou that certainly, I think, have an excellent shot at making the NHL as well. If you look at Team Sweden, Lias Andersson and Elias Pettersson, they both have solid NHL futures ahead of them. I will make one comment on Lias Andersson. As most of you probably noticed, he's the Swedish captain who threw his medal into the crowd. He was visibly upset, and as much as I don't agree with what he did, I think it was a bad choice. But the one thing that everybody needs to keep in mind here, because I think there's been, from what I've seen through social media, there's a lot of bashing going on with him. And as much as I'm not going to agree with what he did by any means, but everybody needs to remember that these are teenagers we're talking about here. They're still at a point in their lives where they're learning to deal with their emotions. And obviously it just shows how much he cares about the game. He wanted to bring a gold medal home for his country, who hasn't won one in quite some time. And he really thought he'd be the hero to do that. Like I said, I don't agree with his choice, and I think at some point he's going to realize that it was a bad idea and regret it. Thankfully, he did get his medal back. I just see a lot of bashing on it, and at the same time, as much as I don't agree with it, I kind of felt bad for him. It was a rash decision, bad choice, definitely shows a bit of immaturity, but I think everybody needs to keep in mind that this is a big stage for young teenagers that are still learning to grow up and mature here. And it's definitely a learning lesson for him, but I'm not going to sit here and bash him. I just don't think I think he's too good of a player, and from what I've seen from a lot of other media outlets, he seems like to be a pretty good kid as well. So I'm going to cut him a little slack. I'm not going to bash him here. I think he made a bad decision, and I hope that he learns from it. A couple other players to mention, more from Team Sweden. Alex Nylander, another Buffalo draft choice, had a tremendous tournament. I think he has a bright future. Obviously, his brother Willie Nylander's playing for the Maple Leafs, and their dad, Michael Nylander's a former NHLer. So he's got some good DNA to work with, and I think Alex is, if he can stay healthy, will have an excellent shot at being an NHL player. But so far, the knock on him is he's started the last 2 training camps and got injured right away. So that's kind of held him back so far. From Team Russia, Klim Kostin, the St. Louis Blues draft pick, was another player who kind of stood out to me as a good dynamic player. I think he's got a bright future. Team Russia, really, a lot of their guys didn't really stick out for me as being overly good. I know they had one undrafted player who was supposed to go top 2 or 3, Svechnikov, I believe his name is. I was a little bit underwhelmed by his performance, but we'll get into that later. So those are my thoughts on the top players. I'm going to be doing another video here shortly where I discuss the top undrafted players. There was a lot of guys expected to go in the first round that will be coming up in this year's 2018 entry draft, and I'm going to be doing a quick video discussing what my thoughts were on their performances and how their performance at this junior tournament will impact their stock in the upcoming draft. And there's definitely Most of the players expected to go in the top 5 are in this tournament, so I'm mainly going to be focusing on them. So stay tuned for that. I hope you enjoyed our coverage of the World Junior Tournament. Hope you enjoyed the action, and we'll be catching you in the next video.